Now, in a disturbing report, Amnesty International says Egyptian authorities have executed dozens of people in just the last few months, in some cases following, quote, grossly unfair mass trials. The rights group says Egypt executed 57 people in October and November, nearly double the 32 reported in the whole of last year. Since Abdel-Fattah El-Sisi became president in 2014, Egypt has sentenced about 3,000 people to death, compared to fewer than 800 death sentences in the previous 6 years. Now, on Monday, the Egyptian president landed in France for a meeting with President Emmanuel Macron, who's been criticized for his silence on Sisi's human rights record. There were two that they were both set to discuss strategic issues. Now, French-Algerian journalist Nabila Ramdani joins us now from London. She specializes in Anglo-French issues, Islamic affairs, and the Arab world. Nabila, thanks so much for being with us. Tell us first, what does Macron really want out of this visit, and is it worth overlooking human rights issues for it?
Well, this is one of those official visits that the French Republic and indeed the French administrations are always very cynical about. They have welcomed dictators and indeed tyrants throughout the decades. And they have treated them as honored guests, whatever their records. And the reasons they do this is because they consider that the French interests are paramount. And if they are making money out of a particular country or indeed gaining in any other way, then that outweighs anything else. And to sum this up, in terms of Egypt, France traditionally made a huge amount of money in selling weapons to Egypt. France also views Egypt as a strategic ally against terrorism. And Sisi is, of course, notorious for his human rights abuses, but Emmanuel Macron is prepared to overlook this full stop. And this is the reason why many opposition groups, including human rights groups, are extremely angry, not simply because Sisi is in France, but because he's been treated as an honored guest. And there have been, bands, including trumpets, and already the Republican Guard cavalry have been escorting Sisi's convoy.
Right. And we'll remember, Nabila, it was only just over a decade ago when Nicolas Sarkozy welcomed Muammar Gaddafi with all this fanfare. It came back to haunt him in many ways. Does this visit smack of that, of Gaddafi's visit from Libya under Sarkozy's administration?
Yes, indeed, there is certainly there are certainly great parallels with the infamous visit of Muammar Gaddafi to Paris within months of President Nicolas Sarkozy being elected president in 2007. And once again, we have a notorious Arab leader coming to Paris and being treated as an honored guest. But the big difference, however, is that Gaddafi was associated with a range of global crimes, including many against the people of France, to put it bluntly. Gaddafi's secret servicemen were notorious for blowing up planes full of French citizens, for example. There was also the stench of dirty money because Sarkozy was accused of accepting illicit funds from Gaddafi. This time we are dealing with a leader surrounded by terrible allegations of mainly concerned with domestic issues and not international ones. But right. I think this visit is particularly about Franco-Egyptian relations over a range of issues that certainly, but I would certainly agree that it's also to do with, geostrategic talks.
Exactly. That's what I wanted to ask about. You did mention the fact that France has its financial interests, which are going to take priority in many senses, but there's also, just geostrategic interests here. Let's look at Libya in the relationship between Egypt and France here. Are they, in a sense, kind of solidifying an anti-Turkey alliance? And to what end?
The talks between President Macron and Sisi are expected to focus on a whole range of issues, including the balance of power in North Africa and the Middle East. There will also be talks about contentious issues, including Israel-Palestine conflict and indeed terrorist groups that are operating in the Sahel. And they will also certainly be focusing on the power vacuum in Libya that was created by the civil war, which of course France was heavily involved in. But I think this shows that generally speaking, France has a very complicated relationship with the Arab world. It tends to support the oppressors, that is to say the rich and the powerful, because it suits them. But they will also traditionally turn allegiances in a second when things go wrong. And this is exactly what happened during the Arab Spring, for example. We have seen how early in the Arab Spring, the French were fulfilling weapons orders for dictatorships in countries like Tunisia and indeed Egypt, showing some kind of support to the established regimes. But then when the revolutions started to be successful, they were proclaiming the triumph of democracy. And this is how France traditionally works.
Nabila, great to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time. Wish we had more of it.